All right, good morning, everyone. Well, good morning for those who are listening to this in the morning anyway. I'm Lee Taft. I'm here with my good friend, Jason Spector. Jason, how you doing?
Amazing today. Amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, hey, welcome to really our second episode of Double Dribble Kids, which is kind of an initiative to bring youth sports back to families and communities and kids just by having a different thought process and thinking through this. Much like education. Right now, I don't think from the very top of the educational pyramid, we're thinking very well. Like we're doing things we're like, what the heck are we doing? Why are we doing this to kids? Well, youth sports has been kind of following that path for quite a while now. And Jason and I just want to share some ideas so maybe you think about it. So Jason, I appreciate you spending some time with us. The last episode that we did, or the first one we did, had tremendous response. People are excited. First of all, they were so excited with you and with your passion and your excitement and your zest for wanting to teach and learn and your background of understanding this stuff. So it was pretty cool. It really was. Did you get some pretty good responses yourself?
Yeah, it's been always one of my favorite things to do are parent universities. And I've had a 15-year run with those with a former organization that I created and developed largely around empathy. And similar to training a young person for a physical skill, I developed several ways to train a young person for some of the social emotional skills around empathy. Empathy for self and others. But I love the feedback because you're making a real difference. It's a true impact. It's hitting someone. And one of the things I always say is never been harder in all of history. Some historian might refer to the Great Depression but I honestly don't know if it's ever been harder to parent young people in all of human history. They are faced with so many challenges, and it's never been harder to be a kid.
Oh, without a doubt. And, so I want to jump into this because I'm so excited about this topic that I want to share with you and get your thoughts on this. And it's funny how impactful, just as a parent, we are for our kids. As a matter of fact, just, kind of funny how my son's mad at me all the time because I'm only 5'10". He's like, come on, Dad. He goes, why couldn't you have been 6'3" or 6'4"? He goes, he's like 5'2" right now. I said, yeah, but you haven't hit your growth spurt yet. So our DNA affects them. But another area that it affects them is our words that we use, our approach, our intensity around them, how we tag certain successes when we're talking about youth sports. And you and I talked about this, and I can't wait to get out of the way and let you talk here. But from age 0 to up to age 8 is really critical, right? That's a really critical stage for identity to be developed. And when we're talking about the way the youth sports industry is right now, just had a dad this morning tell me his best friend signed his 7-year-old for an elite youth travel team, 7 years old. Okay. So where's the kid going to go from there? He's already elite, right? So where do you go if you're already elite at 7, right? So I want you to dive into that a little bit, share with us some of the things we have to be concerned with this. The pressing print is happening really early. Things are being printed into the brain. So where do we go with this?
Oh gosh, there's so many directions. So forgive me if I go too many or get a little crazy here. But first of all, one of the things that I often say is I am no expert in this space. I've just had the privilege to be studying best practices, largely in this educational space, really paying close attention to the social emotional, all during the time raising my own 2 boys. So I'm thinking of a story that's actually pretty profound. I think that speaks a little to what we're talking about. But one of my pet peeves, or one of my biggest frustrations, is currently I'm working with a large population in a very, fairly large school district that, I think our high school has just under somewhere around 900 students to 1,000. But one of my frustrations is I'm seeing kids as a 8, a 9, a 10 out of 10 with limitless potential, or a ceiling that is so high. And I know that they see themselves in the 4 or 5 range.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, with my mindset mastery work, I'm always trying to work on their mindset. But like you said, that 0 to 8 years old is really what sets their internal thermostat. There's an amazing resource for some of the other nerdy people like me out there. Bob Proctor has an amazing video on psychocybernetics, and that really speaks to your internal thermostat and that internal dialogue that you constantly use, which we don't really pay attention to, but that's your subconscious belief. So that is formed 0 to 8 years old. That's formed when you're in this, if you think of kids, unrealistically believing they can fly or they're super fast if they do this with their hands, that's that state. So if there's something traumatic or if there's less than adult behaviors, that is putting a stamp on the brain. Now, here's a good example in the youth sport world, and I tell this story frequently. I'm going to tell a quick version of it, though. So I kind of after a couple experiences with my older son, I mean, just think about the word elite being used around 7-year-old. That's not age appropriate. What's an elite 7-year-old? Like, what's the metric for that? And what it is that we just talked about it in our last video, is it's creating a fixed mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
You're measuring, that's like 100 on the spelling test. You're a genius. So let's call them genius 7-year-olds if they're getting hundreds, right? There's no such thing. It's scientifically proven. So when we talk about, so this story is, I kind of pulled away from the youth sports scene, and I'm a phys ed guy. So I was like, I'm going to do some of this, stuff in the yard and work on tracking the ball in case they want to play, baseball, and hand-eye coordination and do some movement literacy stuff. I mean, we just went fishing this morning, and, my 15-year-old's got an amazing cast, and we're just, I want them to be good at everything and then develop the proficiency at the things that they are passionate about, right? And that comes on their own if you set the table, so to speak. So anyway, my current 15-year-old, when he was in 5th grade, I'm like, okay, let's give this youth soccer thing a try. We're older. We're ready to, we're right on the edge of modified athletics here, 5th and 6th grade, right? And he was a pretty tall and athletic, I thought he could transition in, and he ended up, being a little naive, a little unaware. He thought he wanted to be a goalie, and he's playing around in that position. And some dads are yelling, well, throw it up the left side, getting a little crazy. And I'm like, why would he know to throw it up the left side? This is his first time ever playing goalie. He's only had 2 practices, and all they did was scrimmage. Sure. So I'm just kind of like biting my tongue, like this is just enduring it, kind of wondering if I made a mistake here. So a couple of those experiences. Well, we get in the car after one game. Remember, this is a 5th grader. So we get in the car after one game, and he goes, Dad, I hate that guy. I said, what guy? He said, that guy over there, the bald guy. I was like, oh, why do you hate him? He's like an assistant coach. What happened? He goes, he just poked me in the chest. I said, what do you mean he poked you in the chest? I said, demonstrate it. So he goes, you need to pass it to so-and-so. I don't want to use the person's name in case someone. And I said, and he poked me like 5 times, like pretty hard. Now, my dad, grizzly bear kind of, adrenaline went through me, and I was like, and I've competed in mixed martial arts, and I was an All-American wrestler. And so there aren't too many humans I'm scared of. And in this moment, I thought about, maybe applying some jujitsu chokes or something. But I said, you know what? He was excited. He was really excited about the game. I don't think he meant to poke you. Maybe his feedback, maybe we should consider passing it more to so-and-so, because my son could dribble it up the whole field because he's a little taller, a little faster, a little more mature than the other 5th graders, but he had no skills to do anything with it once he got it there because he hadn't been playing soccer long. So anyway, this dad was frustrated. So, a couple more experiences, and I said, you know what, I think we're going to retire a little bit early from this experience. It wasn't really age appropriate. They were getting punished and running laps. I said, you know what, punished for not being focused enough. And, so I just said, you know what, we're probably going to pull out of this. And one of the coaches said, what's the problem? I said, look, in the spirit of data and so you can understand, I said, this, and this has happened. I said, it's just not our thing. And we're going to choose to kind of, retire early from this season. So I pulled him, and he goes, that happened? He got poked by I said, yeah. And so we ended up seeing that guy. So the coach tells that guy, we ended up seeing that guy. Now I'm like, this is going to be awkward. So I approached him. I said, hey, you know, Miles was a little upset because you had poked him in the chest after a game. And I told him you were excited. And he told him you probably didn't even notice it. Father, feels like an idiot. He apologizes and says, oh no, and he gives him all kinds of compliments. And so now the big picture on that story is, let's say I walked over to the guy and I poked that guy in the chest the day that it happened. Let's say I swore a dozen times on the way home, or let my son hear what I was really thinking in that moment when I was telling my wife when I got home, right? Crack a beer and complain and say, all these idiots, I can't believe this guy. If I see him again, I'm not, that's modeling behaviors. What I modeled for my son was empathy, putting myself in that guy's shoes. What I modeled for my son was patience. And what I modeled for my son was vulnerability. So those types of interactions are what are going to stamp the subconscious brain of that kid when they're wronged again in the future. So the way we behave, the way we act in that 0 to 8 years old, in that youth, even into modified and high school experience, has a tremendous impact beyond what we can comprehend. So I hope that story has value. I know it got a little longer than I wanted it to be.
No, that's tremendous value, because that's exactly it. That's the story. About a month and a half ago, I was at a little tournament not too far from our house and watching. And before my son's team, middle school team, had a little game going on, there was a young kid. I would say, Jason, it had to be, by looking, being phys ed, third grade, fourth grade at most, just by looking at their size. And they're playing, and this one father yelled and screamed the whole game. He was asked to actually leave by an official. He wouldn't leave. Which kid out there do you think got a technical foul? Okay. That father's little boy was the one that got the technical foul. Now, why do you think that happened? Apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? And I remember I actually tried to catch it on film. I was trying to turn my phone towards the dad and towards the kid just to show it so that I could, and I couldn't, I could never get it when I always missed the volcano eruption. I was looking the wrong way. But the bottom line is, you're so right. You see the influence of it, and your story is exactly what is needed, but isn't what's happening. And that's the tough part. So thank you for sharing that. And what are some of the things that, beyond, actually what you did, some of the other things that you think parents have to be aware of pre, during, and post games, especially when we're dealing with these little kids?
Well, I remember from my advanced psychology class, and I just kind of quickly shared, I was an All-American at SUNY Brockport. I took third in the Division III at NCAA's on 2 occasions. And I always point that out because my first year, I just missed qualifying for nationals. My second year, I redshirted because I tore my PCL, which is a freakish injury, which should have never happened. And I'll tell you why it happened. I got foot swept by one of my assistant coaches who was a former national champion. This guy was rugged. He foot swept me because I was depressed. I showed up to practice. I didn't want to be there. I was in love with my former high school girlfriend. I thought I was going to quit. So that shows some of the emotional roller coaster of a sophomore in their second year of college. And then I got injured, redshirted. Next year, I was an All-American. The following year, I got hurt again, had to get surgery for nationals. I went 2-2. I lost the All-American round. So that was devastating, right? To be an All-American, then not. And then I had to come back my senior year and do it all over. And I lost the national champ in the semis by a point. I ended up wrestling back to third again. So I'm really proud of that story because it was cold, hot. But that's the nature of the beast. And a lot of people don't realize that college track. But I'm reflecting back on my college coach's advanced psychology class. When we look at pre-contest or pre-game, the worst thing you can say to a kid or an athlete is, "How do you feel?" That's one of the worst things you can say. After a contest, the best thing you can say, and this has become, in a good way, this has kind of become popular, is, "I love watching you play." That's the best thing you say. Right? So that's become, a lot of people are hearing that. And I don't know how many people are following it, but a lot of people are hearing it, right? And I think that kind of staying back, we could always go back to the growth mindset. It's such a massive so influential and such a massive tool. Being process focused, instead of asking how you feel, you want to focus on prepping and warming up the central nervous system and getting the person ready for an amazing experience. One of my green light thoughts with a lot of the performers I work with isn't just athletes. Sometimes it's with people that have to have a tough conversation, or somebody who's got some performance anxiety. It's showtime. Welcome to the Jason Spector show. I'm putting on a show. I'm going to showcase all the work I've done. So it's more of the show and the performance, not the outcome. And I don't know who's going to win, but I'm going to ensure if you and I are competing, it's going to get nasty, because I'm in a lot of MMA and wrestling conversations and combatant sport situations. So I just have to ensure that I go out and perform and bring an intensity like no other. And I think that's really where the focus is. It's always going to be a process-based focus on readiness, on the performance. It was all the process. And then, you happen to be successful today. Your team had more points, but always going back to that growth mindset, because the fixed mindset is just, it's always going to be, those circuits wire on their own.
Yeah.
Winning is good, losing is bad. That's just, it's always going to be that understanding.
Yep, I agree. Well, I'm going to tell you, Jason, I think this topic and this talk was so vital, and I hope parents understand that, because the impact of the pressure put on kids by the words and the reaction of parents is life-changing. It really is, because it can change their youth development pathway. They can choose to no longer want to join in with friends and other coaches and parents coaching them because of a bad experience and because of the negative feedback or experience that their parent had when they told them the story. Like your son got hit. If it was a major eruption, now maybe your son is thinking, well, I don't think I want to get in that environment again, because that's what happens to my dad when it does, and now it's uncomfortable. Now they're out. I'm out. I don't want to be there anymore. So thank you, first of all, for sharing that.
Yeah, and we got a little sidetracked, so maybe we got to come back to this thing called self-confidence and this self-esteem and this, how that's grown and developed. But I think that, maybe this needed to be front-loaded first, because there are so many instances where things can get off the rails quickly with emotion and I work a lot on this emotional agility. I like to refer to myself as an emotional ninja. That was an emotional ninja move that I pulled on that dad. And, it doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process of training.
It absolutely is. Well, I'll tell you, Jason, I think this was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to jumping into next week's conversation, because I think we got a foundation set here to help building strategies and techniques for parents and for kids who might be listening, as to how to make this the most enjoyable experience and understand what's happening. So hey, I can't thank you enough. I look forward to our next talk, and let's just keep this rolling.
Love it. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
You got it. All right.